about us and what's different than solid adsorbents, we use a liquid, so it's not a cartridge-like system. It's a continuous system in which we load the CO2 in this liquid and the liquid gets further processed. You're studying the environmental benefit of having removed the CO2. That's where we have most of our sales to date. So we've also done some advanced sales, and the biggest contract there that we have is with Google. Even if CO2 emissions stop tomorrow, we still need to remove legacy emissions. So I just thought it's so impactful, and it's also such a hard problem. And that's why you have so many startups and approaches. It is a really hard problem.
Hey everyone, quick note for you. You're currently listening to the free preview of this episode. If you'd like the full thing, the full shebang, go over to our Substack. That's cleantechies.substack.com/subscribe and become a paid subscriber. Any paid subscription gets you full access to the show on the CleanTechies Substack. Welcome back to CleanTechies, the #1 podcast for climate tech entrepreneurs and investors. I'm Silas Maynor, and today I will be your host. Today, we are joined by Anca Timofte, the CEO and founder of Holocene, a direct air capture company that uses a continuous loop process, meaning they don't have to unload and reload any cartridges or take the CO2 out. It basically operates similar to a continuous production chemical plant, where the carbon is captured and removed in the entire process, so it's just constantly going. There's a lot of benefits to it in general. Anca is really a great guest for a number of reasons, but I'd say first of all, she was actually one of the first 10 employees at Climeworks. She was actually there for almost 7 years before eventually going to Stanford to do her MBA. And during her time at Climeworks, she actually learned a lot about what works and what doesn't in carbon capture. Keep in mind, this was well before there was actually an ecosystem of buyers for carbon credits. And the second reason she's such a great guest is they have created something really, really special. This is evidenced by the fact that they were actually the first direct air capture company that Google bought carbon credits from outside of their involvement with the Frontier Fund. On top of this, Anca is just an incredible individual who is very inspiring, especially to somebody like me, who is also a parent working in climate, albeit not on as hard of a problem as she is. I hope you enjoyed today's episode with Anca Timofte. Oh, and one last thing. Please take just 5 minutes to fill out the listener's survey in the show notes. It really, really helps us to understand more of what you're looking for in the coming year. Okay, now to our discussion with Anca. All right, welcome to the show, Anca. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me. How are you doing?
I am fine as frog hair, as my dad usually would say. I'm doing well, just trying to survive the cold weather up here in the middle of winter in Wisconsin. I think yesterday it was like minus 17 Fahrenheit or something like that.
Oh, well, yeah, it's cold everywhere, including Florida, I hear.
Yeah, I saw they just got a bunch of snow. That's crazy. Like usually people lose their mind if they get snow down there. It's not something they're used to. We'll get a foot of it and we'll still be all right. But I guess that's climate change for you. Well, I guess, Anca, tell us what you're building.
Yeah, so I'm the CEO and co-founder of Holocene. We are a direct air capture company. I know you had a recent guest in the same industry on your podcast. So yeah, we build technology that removes carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. We do that with novel organic chemistry. So we'll probably get into that in more detail, but we use new materials to capture carbon dioxide from the air, concentrate it, and with the purpose of either storing it or turning it into other products. And maybe what's different about us, I know there's so many different direct air capture technologies out there. What's different about how we're doing it is that we start with a liquid. So it's an aqueous system, a liquid-based system, as well as a low temperature system. So when we say low temperature, there's different ways to define that. But for us, low temperature specifically means as low as 70 degrees Celsius, so below boiling water temperatures. And that's unique because it just allows us to use different types of energy for that process. So to get the CO2 back out from these materials, and allows us to tap into engineering systems and equipment that already exists. So you should think of us as kind of novel organic chemistry, weird chemistry, and more traditional chemical engineering equipment.
Okay, got it. So I guess then maybe break down the technology a little bit for people who are unfamiliar, and also help us reference like what are the other typical kind of routes that people pursue when it comes to carbon capture?
Yeah, so we always, there's the DOE, by the way, published recently a report where they define direct air capture and the different types. and they do an inventory of all the approaches and of companies in the US, especially with a focus on the US. So there's so many different types. We used to have this matrix, and I can present that verbally with maybe the most typical approaches, but there's just know that there's many others. I would say there's maybe electrochemical, so electrochemistry, those involve only electricity to drive the process. And then there's thermochemical. These are maybe the one first group separation. We are in the thermochemical space, and thermochemical means it's in the name. Thermal means there's some heat involved, and chemicals, there's chemistry. So in that thermochemical space, there's high temperature and low temperature. For high temperature, you should think, usually there we see something like heirloom, so calcium, magnesium, carbonates. It's usually inorganic materials. Once the CO2 is in, it's really hard to get them out. You need to put temperature, you need to raise the temperature to kiln-like temperature, so 900 degrees Celsius to get the CO2 back out. So those are high temperature. And then the low temperature approaches are usually something like a solid adsorbent that's functionalized or essentially made special with amines, and that group of approaches is what you should think in there is like a Climeworks or a lot of other companies in there, and for those approaches usually you have this low temperature feature, so 100 degrees or less. And we're kind of a bit a combination. So we're in the low temperature space, but what's unique about us and what's different than solid adsorbents, which is maybe the closest analogy here, is that we use a liquid. So it's not a cartridge-like system. It's a continuous system in which we load the CO2 in this liquid, and the liquid gets further processed, but we continuously loop that liquid and put it in touch with or in contact with air. So we can continuously add CO2 to that liquid and convert it into concentrated CO2 further down the line. And we do that with those low temperatures that I mentioned. So hopefully that was clear. Electrochemical, thermochemical, and then within that space, several variations.
Mm-hmm. Got it. Okay. Yeah, I think it makes sense. I get the idea. So just to maybe visualize, you said that in your case, what you've got is, it sounds like water, or maybe it's some other kind of liquid solution, but that's kind of circulating, and that has a method of capturing the carbon. And then you're extracting it again and kind of either putting it into another format so you can store it, like you said at the beginning, or upcycle it into other materials. Is that right?
Yeah, I think that summarizes it. And yes, it is water-based. And I would say like another, maybe once you go into the taxonomy and the differences between all the different DAC approaches, is the organic chemistry piece is interesting. So organic chemistry just means carbon, hydrogen, nitrogen. These are materials that you can personalize. So we have our own materials. We have generations of these materials, and kind of the type of organic chemistry that we're doing, it's a white space right now. No one else is in that space.
Oh, interesting. So the organic chemistry piece is that you're just taking kind of the basic materials. You're not synthesizing them or changing them anyway before you use them. Is that correct?
So it means we can make our own materials. So we essentially start with, we use amino acids, which I know many people have heard of. Amino acids, amines, very similar. So there's some groups in there that interact especially well with carbon dioxide. So there's some of the chemistry or the basic chemistry is maybe the same with what others have seen, but the type of amino acid that we use and then the way we process it further with other materials, that's where it's novel. And we can learn from a first generation chemistry in a piece of equipment and essentially tweak that chemistry, continuously tweak. And actually our materials are our own materials as we go further down the line or further through generational developments of our technology.
You know that feeling when you meet someone who shares your vision for the future? It just clicks, like two peas in a pod. Well, that's exactly how we felt when we met Goodwin, who we are proud to have as our sponsor.
Being the first major law firm to set up a climate-specific startup and venture practice makes them exactly the kind of partner we are excited to work with. They realize that there are a plethora of challenges to building climate tech startups, and that's why they have built an entire suite of resources for founders, investors, and entrepreneurs in the space. They even offer several tailored pricing methods. And guess what? It doesn't matter where you are listening to this. Goodwin is a global law firm that you can trust to be your partner through it all, from incorporation to exit. They've got you covered.
Go to goodwinlaw.com and tell them CleanTechies sent you to get exclusive access to startup resources. All right, back to the show.
Okay, got it. And then I guess one thing I'm curious about is, are you at a stage where you already have relatively well-defined the business model of who you sell to and what's the product? Or are you still in that phase where it's like, hey, we're getting the technology down and there's multiple ways we could commercialize?
Yeah, so I think, I think a lot of direct capture companies are, I think in terms of customers or who we can sell to, I think we're all maybe looking at similar segments. And And the way we think about our customers, right? So it's those two lines that I mentioned. The first line is we concentrate CO2. We can store it underground, and there we would partner with others to store that CO2 and sell carbon dioxide removal credits, or they're called in different ways. You can also call them negative emission. They have, I think we need to all align on the same terminology at some point, but for a while, I think it's the idea of you're selling the environmental benefit of having removed the CO2. And I think that's where we have most of our sales to date. So we've also done some advanced sales, and the biggest contract there that we have is with Google. The other branch is using that concentrated CO2 from our machines to sell to partners who want to convert the CO2 and turn it into synthetic fuel. So it could be methane, it could be chemicals, it could be ethylene. So and others, it will all depend on it. Essentially, it's reversing almost combustion. You take a CO2 molecule, you take hydrogen, and you have to put some energy into that and turn it into a longer hydrocarbon chain. So both of those options or both of those customer segments are available to us, and we're pursuing both.
And so I guess slightly curious how you landed those, like how you landed the deal with Google. Is there a lot of appetite for these types of future purchases to fund these projects? Was it a really challenging kind of fight, or is there lots of different kind of investment going on right now?
Yeah, so I think right, we know that especially tech companies are, the ones that are energy intensive are looking at, developing in different ways, and also are more sophisticated, I think, in terms of their like environmental like footprint thinking, and what, how they want to make things whole, like their net zero plans are clear, and they also have some maybe extra cash on the balance sheet to spend on projects like these. So we know that the tech or software sectors were especially really good customers and supporters of our space. I would say, for us, we're a relatively young company still. This deal was in a way opportunistic, but I feel like we just found a really good partner in Google. We had similar views, similar missions. They really liked our ambition to reduce the cost of direct air capture. So we sold it at a really good price point of $100 a ton, which is kind of a magical number in our space. And yeah, there were just a lot of mission alignment. And obviously, this is a really long partnership. We still have to go through stages of development to deliver on that promise we made to Google. But they've seen enough in what we've built so far, and our data and our team to believe that we can do it and we can achieve that mission.
Mm-hmm. So on this topic, kind of maybe going slightly backwards to your breakdown of the different types of carbon capture, is there a particular, I guess, advantage to your technology over the other types of systems? And does that play into why Google may have chosen your tech?
Yeah, I think obviously, I think we're almost part of this new wave of direct air capture companies. So to exist in your space, you need to have a better technology, or you need to have more potential than the incumbents. And I think for us, the reason this specific chemistry and approach was really attractive is that continuity piece that I mentioned. So you can continuously load the CO2 into our system. The other approach is solid adsorbents. They're more like cartridges. So when a cartridge is full, you need to empty it, you need to refill it. So there's that interruption. This, in chemical engineering, people distinguish between continuous system and batch system. So the cartridge analogy is more like a batch system. And there is just our approach is more like how a chemical plant would function. Mm-hmm. You can tap into those traditional chemical engineering principles, and just continuity is good, right? Like having things run the same way. I think it just intuitively it has that approach. And then the low temperature is really good, like up to 70 Celsius. That's really promising, because that means we can use a lot of different types of waste heat. It could be from industrial sources, but it could also be from manufacturing, from data centers. So that enables, right? Like we know price of electricity and energy in general is really important for direct air capture. And like, if you can play on that, like turn that knob down in terms of cost of energy, a type of energy and level of heat that you need, it makes a really big difference in the economics of the process. I would say those are the two big ones.
Climate tech founders are taking on a huge challenge. Not only do they need to know how to build a startup, but they also need to deal with hardware, have a strong handle on climate policy, know how to fundraise from diverse investor types. It's a lot.
That's why we made CleanTechies, the #1 podcast for climate tech entrepreneurs. In addition to our jobs, we devote 20 hours a week to producing this podcast for you. This way you can learn from the people who have walked the path before you, learn from their mistakes, and gain insights on navigating this complex journey. If this mission resonates with you, we are asking for your help. It takes a lot of effort and it's not free.
If you are already a subscriber and want to help, start supporting us today by going to Substack and clicking upgrade to paid. Thanks for helping all the climate tech entrepreneurs like you. Yeah, of course, because energy is usually the biggest cost in this, right? So if you can reduce the amount of energy because you don't have to heat it as much, then it makes the overall cost lower. So I guess where are you guys today in terms of projects deployed? I mean, you obviously have this deal with Google. I'm assuming they intend to buy more, assuming things go well, right? So just walk us through where you are today with your deployment.
Yeah, so we got started, in earnest maybe 2.5 years ago. And I say in earnest because there's a long founding story here. But we have 5 customers today. We've tested the chemistry and different variations of it or different generations of it on a bench level as well as on a pilot level. So we have an industrial pilot that we launched in May of last year. We've commissioned it for a couple months and now we've been running it more or less continuously. We got very exciting data recently because we had freezing conditions in Tennessee where we have the pilot and where our company is located. So we got, for us, it's really important to run the system with real air in different weather conditions, see how the system performs. So this is what we've been doing. And meanwhile, we're engineering our next facility, which is our demonstration facility. It's 200 to 500 times bigger than what we built to date, but it's the next normal stage for us in terms of how you would scale a normal chemical process. So we're kind of at a pilot stage, TRL level 5, if you use those technology readiness levels mindset, and we're going towards the demonstration facility. And the demonstration is that intersection of you're proving all of the engineering, you should remove engineering risk, but it's also the first commercially relevant facility. So we've sold carbon removal credits from the demonstration facility. So we're approaching that kind of de-risk engineering and hopefully more commercial traction.
So with the first pilot, you were then able to get enough data and prove that you were able to sell the next facility that you're going to build, that you're in the process of engineering. You're able to pre-sell some of the production capacity from that. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. So we have 5 customers today. Frontier, which is a big customer aggregator and supporter of DAC, is in our list, as well as Milky Way, Klarna. So I think in a way the usual suspects, and then Google. This was their first deal outside of Frontier that they've done with a DAC company. So We're in discussions with more customers, but so far, we have those 5 customers and looking to sell both from this demonstration facility as well as from the next one, which is a commercial scale facility. So we actually are selling capacity as late as 2030s, so mid of 2030s.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's interesting the unique, capacity to be able to sell some of this ahead of time. This is not something that I think a lot of the other climate technology companies are doing, but I believe that there's probably a possibility to test some of this out in the future, with pre-sale of future items. I think, even Tesla did this, right? They kind of pre-sold the Roadster initially to try to get some orders there. But I guess this is really interesting. So we understand the kind of the what now. So I'd be really curious to go into, why did you start this in the first place? What led you to wanting to found Holocene?
Yeah, so there's I think the story can be very long. I'll try to keep it brief. I'm a chemical engineer by training, and my usual path would have been working more in traditional chemical engineering spaces like oil and gas or chemicals, consumer products that involve chemicals. And I was lucky enough to have been inspired by one of my professors at university who was doing environmental chemistry and really became passionate about this topic right out of school. Ended up in Switzerland to what I thought would be an academic career. I was doing research and doing my master's, and came across Climeworks, which is one of the earliest companies. They might be the first. I don't know. There's Carbon Engineering and Climeworks. They both got started in 2009. I don't want to, mess up history here, which is very important. But they both, this whole industry got started, and direct air capture got started in 2009. It was following this first IPCC report saying that we need to remove carbon dioxide from the air, and it needs it won't be enough to plant trees, etc. So out of that, Climeworks was very early days. I got to meet them when there were only 5 people. So I essentially joined a startup in a new industry, which is a super exciting time. I was there for about 8 years. And I really I loved the startup world, and I loved director capture. I thought it's such an impactful potential technology, and it's kind of, in a way, it could be a backstop maybe to, but like, we know we want to decarbonize so many sectors, but in the end, like, anything that we cannot decarbonize fast enough has to be removed. And, at this point, we've already emitted so much CO2 that even if, CO2 emissions stop tomorrow, we still need to remove legacy emissions. So I just thought it's so impactful. And it's also such a hard problem. And that's why you have so many startups and approaches. It is a really hard problem. You're looking, people always say you're looking for a needle in a haystack. There's very little CO2 in a way in the atmosphere from a chemical engineer perspective. So the concentration is so low, and it's a super hard technical problem. I think that attracted me to the space, as well as the impact of the technology. So I've been in DAC for more than 12 years. I'm afraid to count. I started Holocene after going to business school. So I had left Climeworks. I went to business school to essentially try to look beyond engineering. I wanted to see what else, could impact a climate company and really start the climate revolution. Like, what, I knew financing could be really important, as well as policy. So I wanted to learn about these things, and came across the nugget of the chemistry from in a scientific paper, and kind of the rest is history from there. Was so intrigued by the process and the chemistry and the potential, and that the fact that it was very different than anything else out there, and it still is. I had to attempt it on my own and kind of do it my own way. I go at my own pace. So that's how I ended up starting Holocene.
Yeah, I mean, I was going to ask you, because if you worked with Climeworks and you decided to start your own, you obviously have a strong belief that you can do it a little bit better, right? or maybe at least differently at the bare minimum, right?
Unassumed that I think it's people assume that. I know. I think because I've seen it done at Climeworks, I know how hard it is. I think seeing year after year, and Climeworks, I have a lot of respect. When they started, right, there was none of the Department of Energy grants, tax credits that we see today, incentives. There were no customers. There was nothing. It was almost unbelievable that the field got started at all. So they had to build their own market. They had to educate everyone about the space. So they had a very tough journey, and I'm very proud of what I achieved while I was there. So, but yeah, then the new chemistry comes about. I have now my own way of wanting to do things. So I think it's a very normal startup story or founding story. You have a founder who worked at a startup who wants to do his or her own thing.
I think it's underrated. A lot of people, especially in climate, we'll see how things change now a little bit, but I think a lot of people want to build companies in climate, but I think a lot of people don't have that much experience. And yes, it's very fine and dandy to want to do that, but having the experience is really valuable, because you probably avoided so many mistakes that you may have made if you were just going through this on the first time on your own, right? Rather than having seen what not to do with Climeworks, right? And we won't get into that. We won't ask you to share any secrets, but yeah, I find it very fascinating. One thing I'd love to understand is, did you always want to become an entrepreneur at some point, or was this just something that kind of got instilled into you through seeing what's going on at Climeworks and being part of a startup there?
I think it's a yes and no. My dad was an entrepreneur. I come from Romania. I grew up in post-communist Romania, and my dad had a startup before private property was allowed or legal or cool. So he's a true entrepreneur at heart. One of these people who has project after project and always ideas. He has business ideas now as well in retirement. So I did grow up with that around me. I don't know. I don't know that I had the courage until I had seen it done at Climeworks. And I think I've learned a lot of very positive things there. And yes, business school, especially at Stanford and Silicon Valley, there's nothing to give you that courage that you need, or also resources that you need, to be honest. So I think, it's hard to say, kind of yes and no.
Yeah, I mean, if you went through Stanford, you've basically got the stamp of success just written all over you, right?
I don't know about that.
Stanford has I don't know if you know this, but Stanford has a very, very high rate of successful founders coming out of there. But
they're also not afraid of failure. So that's one thing they teach you. There's a lot of failed startups as well. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, you've talked to us a little bit about, I guess, how you started Holocene, but maybe walk us through some of the early days of, like, once you decided you were going to go on to this, what did some of the realistic things look like? I mean, was it, I don't know. I think a lot of people are afraid of, what do I have to do financially to set aside to achieve this? Like, how's it going to affect my family life? Things like that.
Yeah. So I started the company while I was still in business school. And I think there are different stages of commitment. This is something I think I didn't understand maybe from the outside coming into entrepreneurship. I thought, from the beginning, I think we always see these really great stories that are obviously simplified, but I think it's very normal. And I have a lot of founder friends from Stanford and otherwise it's like there's different levels of commitment, right? Like there's decision. So for me, the first decision was, well, I had, during the MBA program, you have to do an internship during that first year and second year. And it kind of like sets your trajectory for after business school. And like, I was interviewing for VC internships and I had to say no to something to do the startup. And like, so the decision that was, you could say that's not a big loss in a way. Like it's worth the risk for one summer. It's not a big sacrifice, but I think this is how entrepreneurship is. It's like decisions or other opportunities come to you and you have to say no to them to commit to the startup. And it was phased. I think, right, like approaching at some point, like you're one person, you have a small group of people. At some point, the moment comes like, okay, are we really doing this? Are we not taking other jobs? Are we not applying for other things and really committing? And I think, yeah, I had also, in terms of finding my co-founders, I found one of my co-founders was a really good friend. I had to convince him to move from Switzerland. That took a little bit of time. And then I found my other co-founder like almost 2 years later. So I feel like also the founding stories are also not as clean as we see in the movies where it's like, oh, like everyone meets in like one cafe and everything's great. It's not like that, or it wasn't like that for me. So I think that yeah, hopefully I answered the question, but this journey is a little bit more, there's more decision points than you would think. And I feel like there's time where you can kind of give up or continue. And I think, right, obviously I'm here, so I continued and I found a lot of meaning and joy in doing this so far.
Yeah, and I think the learning how to say no to things is something I'm really terrible at, but any successful entrepreneur has figured out, right? So maybe I got to keep working on that. But it looks like you have. So how did you know that it was a fit with your co-founders? Because, I don't know the exact stats around this, but a lot of companies who fail because there's just a mismatch with the co-founders.
Yeah, it is. I think people, there's always these cliches, and I think my theory on cliches in general about everything is like there's a reason why there are cliches like that. I think with founders, people say it's like a marriage. It is a very personal relationship, right? Like at some point you've put a lot of energy and time and you've said no to all these other great opportunities, and it means a lot to you. It's more than a job, right? Like being a founder. I know a lot of people care a lot about their jobs. I did when I was an employee before, but it's like when you're a founder, your whole life is wrapped up on your identity is wrapped up in the company. It's tough. And then you're alongside these other people and they maybe have different wishes or visions or anything. And I think I think you'll hear that a lot, like not being able to have a fight with your co-founder and find a resolution and like do it in a way in which is like productive for the company and brings the company forward. I think this is something. So for me, it's always like a bit testing to see, are these people I'm comfortable with? Can they handle a challenge? How much do they care about the space? I think it's the normal questions. There's no like magic secret question or a bullet that I've seen, but I think having the same values and imagining at some point there are really hard decisions you need to make and like what it feels like, with those people to have those super tough conversations.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. So, okay, shifting the conversation quite drastically here. With Trump 2.0 now in office, as we're recording on January 22nd, how do you feel about your business? Like headwinds, tailwinds? Like I haven't talked to anybody in detail about the carbon capture space regarding like what it looks like under Trump. So I'm just kind of curious how you view the future right now.
Yeah, I think we are, as a lot of other industries or sub-industries, we're waiting to understand exactly what the new administration, like how they see the space and in which ways support that we were counting on before or, was available to us before is or isn't there. I think for now is like we all need to kind of wait and see a little bit. It's really hard because as founders, right, you want to take control and get ahead of situations and plan. And I think that I have that instinct too, but at the same time, we know there are changes coming and like change usually takes time, especially at the level of the federal government. So I know we won't have a lot of clarity for a lot of time. And for me, it's just like trying to focus on the things that I can do and can impact. And, for us, that's technology and other sources of funding and, working with the team on the strategy for 2025 outside of grants, as well as, potential grants that might come. So I think it's trying to not, I think this is one of these situations like entrepreneurship is navigating uncertainty a lot. And I think there's this moment of uncertainty, significant. So trying our best to not, obsess about the things we don't know and can control and focus on the things that we can. I will say that, for carbon capture, I think maybe we're in the lucky category, you could say, or right, we're not like so directly on the chopping block. It is considered a bipartisan effort. There's support for it in different ways. So So I think there's a lot of potential optimism. At the same time, right, there is a big change coming and it will affect us, I'm sure, as well, and just don't know yet how. And I'll say there's something to be said about having been in the space for so long and knowing what the space looked like before there were any grant support. I feel like you just need to zoom out a bit. This is a historical problem we're trying to solve of CO2, and right, it's I think like zooming out a little bit and trying to find the best ways to proceed for the next couple of weeks, months, as uncertainty is there, then live with the certainty there is there, and persevere through all of these moments. But I'm half giving myself a pep talk, and anyone else who's listening.
Yeah, well, I mean, the reason I ask is because it's uncertain to me what people like how the average conservative person would view carbon capture, because my understanding is that it's probably not something they think about too much or talk about much. And I was wondering or speculating that perhaps because there has been a lot of oil and gas companies who are funding these companies, these carbon capture technologies, to try to capture on source, so they can kind of just, their objective would be, let's keep doing our thing, keep drilling and making oil, but we'll just capture the carbon, right? Hypothetically. And I was just curious if you had seen any kind of rumblings that falls into this, let's say, energy abundance, kind of American dynamism kind of vibe.
Yeah, I think, yes, it's, it's like direct air capture is kind of adjacent to this like point source capture industry that is really connected to natural gas, and other fossil fuel burning that that emits CO2 that can be captured, etc. So we're kind of in the proximity of that industry, I think. Yeah, and maybe that's what makes it bipartisan. Sometimes people that we encounter, and we're in Tennessee, where I think the space of direct air capture is relatively new. I think people are trying to understand, what are the benefits, what are the jobs, what's the workforce development that is required, and is this something of the future? I think it's very pragmatic questions that people have, at least on a state level, or the folks we're encountering. So we wait and see. And I think it's very tempting to speculate about things, but at the same time, I think we'll have some clarity hopefully soon, and at the same time, again, focus on the things that we can control, which there's a lot of technology development. I think there's still a lot of customers that are very excited to support startups and other sources of funding. So I think we need to go down through this.
It's certainly kind of a weird time, but if I was in, I mean, again, it's not my place, but if I was in your shoes, I'd probably be pitching, hey, nobody says no to clean air, right? Like we'll clean your air for you, right? Regardless of you're a Democrat or Republican, everybody wants clean air, right? Yes, so there's a lot of ways that it could be positioned to be like, you can have your cake and eat it too with carbon capture, despite it, maybe not being what we ultimately would like to see, right? With mitigation.
Yeah. I think if people didn't believe in climate change or didn't think the climate problem was a big issue, I think our field would not thrive the way we are envisioning it right now. Our company's mission, I should say, is to remove CO2 from the atmosphere to a level where you would see a difference in the atmosphere, that the CO2 is gone.
All right, everybody, that is the free version of this episode. If you'd like to get the entire version, the unfiltered, unedited, no, just kidding, there's definitely some editing, but if you'd like to get the entire discussion of this conversation with Anca, as well as all of the other discussions that we have and the other kind of premium content that we put out, you can go to cleantechies.substack.com/subscribe and choose any paid tier. I know it's a very unfortunate situation that you can't hear the rest of this episode. However, it could be a fortunate situation if you realize that today is your time, your chance, your time, your opportunity. It's your moment to become a paid subscriber to CleanTechies. By doing so, you get access, like I said, to this entire discussion, as well as all of the full episodes that we put out. And, drumroll please, you can join our subscribers chat. We have a WhatsApp group chat where we talk with all of the other people in the community. We ask different questions, give them some heads up about who's coming on the show. They get a little bit of input. We kind of help each other out. There's so many different things we do, but community is everything, right? So if you'd like to become a paid subscriber, do that today. cleantechies.substack.com/subscribe and choose any paid tier. We really greatly appreciate your consideration of this situation, because it takes a lot of effort to put out this show, and we'd love to see you on the other side. All right, take care.